Welcome to Soromance. I'm Mora, and today we are doing a special Halloween episode to talk about the Necromancer Novellas. My regular co host hasn't read these books, so Lee will not be joining us today. Instead, I found someone way better to talk to the author of the novellas himself, and also the Malazan Book of the Fallen and the ongoing Karkanas and Witness trilogies, Mr. Steven Erikson. Hi,
Hello.
Steve. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
How are you doing?
I'm okay. I've just come back from the gym, so I'm kind of physically tired, but otherwise good.
Right. So I'll not take much of your time, hopefully. How's
Well,
the
as long as required, for sure.
How is the writing going nowadays?
It's going well. I'm probably at the three-fifths mark of the novel No Life Forsaken, which is the second in the Karsa Witness trilogy,
Witness. Yeah,
and it's been rolling along nicely. So I'm pleased with that.
that's very nice to hear. At some point, you were writing three books at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah, they're the other ones are sort of in hiatus at the moment. I'm concentrating exclusively on No Life Forsaken, and when I'm done that, I'm actually going to the third Carcanis novel.
Yeah, yeah.
I should roll straight into it. Yeah.
I've been waiting for that. Can I just ask, is it going to be a single book, Walk in Shadow? Is it
hmm
any chance it's going to be split into two? No?
It is possible. It's good. I mean, if it isn't, it's going to be a very big book, a
Yeah,
very long
yeah.
book. But I do have two very distinct story threads that I'm hoping to blend them seamlessly into a single novel. But it may be that I do separate them, or the publishers decide, okay, we'll separate these two. We'll see.
Yeah, we were hoping that it becomes, like a trilogy of four books.
Well, yeah, it just might become that. Absolutely. Yeah. It's because there's a whole storyline related to the High King. So that's a bit of news I'm dropping here.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's exciting to hear. Yeah.
Hmm.
Uh, are we getting a sequel for Rejoice?
I would love to write a sequel for Rejoice, but I mean, at the same time, the response to the first book was pretty minimal, and so, in terms of the publishers, there's nobody on the phone calling me asking for it.
Oh,
So,
no.
if I do it, it will be because I'm interested in doing it and I have time, and that's sort of where it's sitting at the moment. I started it, so I think I have about 40 pages. So I know where it's going as a story, but there are too many other things on the table at the moment. So
Is Sam coming back?
actually, no, I think she may appear um, tangentially, maybe in the second book, but it's a new set of characters and some years have passed. So at least a couple,
Oh, there's
at
going to
least a
be a
couple,
time gap, right?
a
That's
little bit, just a little bit, because the dust has to settle on what's happened, and humanity has to adapt to a new paradigm, and so that's part of what's going on in this novel.
yeah.
But it's also a novel that takes me to Mars, so I've had to do a lot of research on that as well. So.
Okay. That's nice to hear. Oh, but that was a I really enjoyed Rejoice.
Oh, I'm
It
glad.
had
I'm
the
glad.
old timey sci-fi flavor.
hmm Yeah, it's a very traditional science fiction novel, but I don't know if there is an audience for it anymore. In any kind of large sense, because it's a novel of ideas as opposed to high end action or
Action, yeah.
yeah. So I don't know what kind of readership is still exists out there for that kind of book.
We Once I read the book, I made an episode on this podcast to tell my co-host to read it. So that was a fun fun time for us.
Have you discussed it at all, or done any analysis?
In a
Ah,
non-spoilery way.
okay.
I just compared because most of the people who listen are Malazan fans. So I
hmm
was trying to show that, because I truly think that Rejoice is sort of like Malazan in space. I don't know, many people say that it's not, but somehow I
Well,
felt,
no, I think you have a point. I think it's exploring some of the same ideas um, that were part of the thematic drive of the Malazan books, and it
yeah,
does explore them in a more obviously mimetic fashion, drawing it back into this world in a direct fashion. And of course, with fantasy, you can take all those metaphors, you can make them real, but they're always once removed, so it allows the reader a certain level of objectivity in dealing with the issues of the human condition that are um, problematic. And so Rejoice was very much, I guess, just throwing off the constraints of those themes and addressing them directly within our world. Sure. So I think you have a point. You have a good argument.
Yeah, because even the characters, because there were quite a few for such a small book, the
Mm-hmm.
number of characters were quite high, and people like the African terrorist, the one with
Mm.
Nila, I forgot the Kolo, Kobo.
Kolo,
Sorry,
I think. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
gray characters like that, because we are so used to reading them in Malayalam, and it's not something I see often in sci-fi, at least.
Mm.
So
Well,
for me, that
it's no, no. I agree. It's a question that always probably will haunt me all my life, and that is the question of redemption and what is possible in terms of redemption, uh, given what a person might end up doing or have done. Um, and so it's always something I'm going to be exploring. It's always a question I'm going to ask. Is there a line you draw in the sand? For a person and say that there's no redemption possible for what they've done. And even if that has happened and it happened sort of culturally or socially, how does that person deal with it themselves? How do they live with it? What is their next act? And that's very much sort of stuff I explored in the Malazan stuff, but I could do it much more directly with a character who was a grown up child soldier. Yeah. Yeah. So what drew you to the Bocaline Coral Brooch novellas? Because they're a whole different beast.
I I'm not sure. One of my friends was reading and he said these are very funny. So
Hmm.
actually, we have this read along going on in the subreddit. So
All
I
right.
finished Midnight Tide. Like I'm rereading, so I just finished Midnight Tides, and
Mm-hmm.
it went quite quickly for a reread. So I
Mm-hmm.
was in between books, so I just picked them up.
Right. Okay.
And just before I picked up Corbel Broken, I had just finished Calvino's "If on a Winter's Night a Traveler." You're
Hmm.
not familiar with that, so that's
Oh,
the sort of.
Calvino. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
so that was a really nice background reading before I started the Crackpot Trail. So
Absolutely. I mean, Calvino is. Yeah. I remember reading the Non-Existent Night and that collection, and yeah, they were great fun. They were great fun. Curiously, though, I mean, to me, they are. I mean, they call them magic realism, but it's fantasy.
fantasy,
It's
yeah, yeah.
fantasy. It's just a tall tale with a strong existential, streak running through it. But yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, okay. Because that was the one book I read, If on a Winter's Night, and that is the same premise of
Hmm.
stories within stories, and it
Hmm.
just
Yeah,
breaks the fourth wall, isn't it? It just starts talking to the reader directly. So I think
yeah.
that was really good coming to CPT.
I mean, Crackpot Trail is probably um, the purest joy I ever had in writing something.
Oh,
It was so much fun to write, and the inspirations and were coming from all over the place. I mean, you had Chaucer, but you also had Sir Richard Burton and Thousand and One Nights, but also his introduction to it actually is where I found the voice for Flicker.
okay.
Um, so there was, yeah, a lot of things going on, and then folding the story inside itself over and over and over again
Yeah.
was kind of what it was all about.
Oh, I really enjoyed reading it
It's
because
crazy. It's a crazy story.
but it's so verbose. Was it like intentional that you wanted to make people like slow down and take
Hmm.
time to read it? Because
Oh,
it did not
absolutely.
flow at all. Almost every
No.
sentence I had to keep rereading them.
Well, and interestingly, I mean, if you read some of Sir Richard Burton's surviving uh, non-fictional stuff, of which there's very little, there is that kind of, well, it's a product of its time, and so there's something to the language that just captivated me, and that's the rhythm I sort of fell into almost immediately. Because I remember I just read his introduction and went onto a blank page and just started writing, and there was the voice right there. but I was also thinking a lot about Chaucer, and um, actually, I was also thinking about Ivanhoe, which is actually an extremely funny novel. And Chaucer does this kind of elaborate introduction of characters. Um, and so when I was writing, I ended up basically laying them all out, all these characters, and then turned around and summarized it all over again. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was just. I remember I sent the first, I don't know, 40 pages to. It was being published by PS Publishing, and so I was in communication with Peter Crowther, who ran the company, and I sent him those first 40 pages and asked him if I could get away with this, and he just said he had no idea if I could get away with this or not, but just keep going. So I did.
So that introduction chapter was was the best because I'm used to characters just being casually mentioned and vaguely
Yeah,
described and all that. So I kept reading and then I get a page long summary and I think you have a line saying that we have thoroughly digested this and
yeah.
not even a babe is going to choke on this.
Yeah, and a lot of it is, I guess, me also responding to a lot of criticism that has been directed towards the Malazan series as well,
Yeah,
where for a long time people were not quite getting the characterization that was going on in the writing style I was using, um, and so I just took out the mallet and just started hammering it home, right, and repeatedly hammered it home.
yeah,
So um, I mean, in a way, it's the extreme version of tell, don't show.
okay.
And of course, I write as show, don't tell. So I just went the opposite direction here and say, okay, this is what you want. You can have it.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, it comes through, the fun you're having while writing it because
it was
it's quite
fun.
obvious in the in the writing.
Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun.
One of my friends wanted to know, like, how much fun did you have while writing the poems there, the Lassine poetry?
You know what? It is really hard. This sounds weird, but it's hard to write really bad poetry. It's
Hmm.
actually hard, but I had a blast doing it. And yeah, it was just such good fun um, to create a character like Brash Fluster and just let him go with it, and then to throw in a critic as well who was going to be judging all of this stuff was good fun.
Yeah. Oh, can I just ask you about that? Because Apt Canavarian is one of the saddest characters I've seen.
Oh,
He
that's
goes
good.
through.
I have to tell AP because it's based on AP Canavan. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, because we have all seen his videos. I mean, I'm sure if I
Mm,
read the book before he started his channel, I wouldn't have got half the jokes. But now I
right.
can read everything in his voice, and
Good.
it just
Good.
makes it much more funnier. Is
Yeah.
how was that when his reaction when you showed him that this is what you're going to do?
Um, I don't know what his reaction. I mean, he probably didn't even see a version of it until it was published. So um,
Oh, that's
I don't think he did. I could be wrong there. I don't remember actually whether he got to see it or not. I know he probably knew I was going to return to Apto in another novella and have some more
in
fun with him. Yeah, yeah,
Fiends. Yeah, he's
yeah,
even
yeah.
more worse there, isn't it? Because
Isn't he?
you,
Yeah,
yeah, you put him on a pedestal to hide from people. There's a lot of stuff with Apto,
yeah,
but it was great fun to read it.
yeah. And he's certainly a character I don't intend to kill easily. So
No, I was waiting to see that he's going to have a horrible death or something, but he lives. So
no, no, it's much more fun torturing him endlessly. So
yeah. About the Lassine poetry, where I think
hmm
Flickr just tells us that he is trying to humanize her. And my co-host of this podcast, he's written like essays and essays on defense of Lassine. That's what he names the series of essays he's written. So he goes around trying to interpret all her actions through a sympathetic eye and
all
trying to
right.
show. So it's good fun. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of his Bone Hunters interpretation is pretty good. So,
Mm.
and then I just told him that all these essays are of no use. It happens in a single poem here. She is
Yeah,
humanized
yeah.
and
And of course, it's all there's all innuendo running all the way through all of it, right? So,
yeah,
which is very much Sir Richard Burton, and probably. and Chaucer for that matter. I mean, that's just there's a lot of sexual humor running through Chaucer. So
Yeah.
running with that was a lot of fun, and sort of flipping Lessine, who is the most serious character imaginable in the Malazan books, and just
It's
flipping the tale that way was good fun.
yeah. Even the sex scenes and all were so over the top, and something we are
So
not used to in in the rest of the books, isn't it? So that was
yeah,
great fun to read.
yeah, they're definitely over the top. Yeah.
Yeah. When I started reading it and I found out that this has a narrator and he calls himself a poet. So I
Mhm.
was sort of hoping that it was the guy who wrote the sayings of the fool. Usually,
Oh,
like,
Finis Boole. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I
yeah.
was hoping that was him, but then Flickr is amazing. Flickr is, yeah. I was
I,
slightly,
I simply I don't know if I can ever recapture his voice. Um, it really felt like he just took over the story. I don't know where he came from in terms of that voice and that attitude. And I don't know if I can ever recapture it. It's like he made this you know outrageous appearance and then just stepped off
okay.
stage again.
No,
So
because this is such an outlier, among the rest of the
mhm,
novellas.
yeah.
So, sort of it reminds me of Toll the Hounds because that has a
Mm,
distinct voice and a distinct narrator, and it doesn't really match with the rest of the tone of the series. So I was trying
that's
to,
interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. In some ways, yeah. I mean, there's there's a kind of expectation in fantasy literature in the genre that unless you are writing first person um, narrative style, uh, generally it's a kind of almost neutral, objective style of narration. The narrator is almost invisible
yeah,
on the page, and so every now and then, I feel like I want to sort of shake off those shackles and let a voice fully expand to direct the story, to shape the story. And I, I, I guess I wrote Toll the Hounds before I wrote Crackpot Trail. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which came first, but they're definitely related to each other in the way you describe. Just sort of letting myself fall into that character's voice and that character's mindset, and let them say what they want to say,
yeah.
and then just sit back and see how that works. I don't think I could have done it for all 10 books, but it was certainly necessary for Toll the Hounds.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Told the Hound Scrub's voice and the way he directly talks, that was my favorite. And I didn't know how
Mm.
to like look for books which have that kind of the way you're describing it, that the narrator is center and he's not an objective narrator. So I,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that I would find it with Crackpot Trail.
No, but I mean, yeah, it's rare. We don't see it very often anymore because it takes a particular approach to storytelling, which may not be as common as it used to be. One author that immediately comes to mind is George MacDonald Fraser, who did the Flashman series, and that was a huge inspiration for me because Flashman is one of the most despicable characters you could imagine. But these are his memoirs, and he's just laying it all out. Revealing the illusion of how the rest of the world saw him, basically as this hero of the British Empire, and he's anything but. He is just the most despicable character, a complete card, and so you end up following, and because it's his voice and it's first person, you can't help but sort of continue to read. And Fraser wrote at least 8 or 9 books based on using Flashman, and they're extraordinary reads. Very interesting pseudo historical fiction, but a lot of fun. But also sort of cringe comedy kind of stuff.
Okay. The When we all heard that the Karsa trilogy will not have Karsa in the first book, and
Hmm.
but then I realized that you've already done it here, isn't it? Because Corval Brook and
Yeah.
Walkley, they don't really appear, and that was a really good anticlimactic ending because it's
Well,
it's like
they're there though. I mean, that's in a sense they are there in the entire book, but they're not physically there. But they're there in every other respect. Um,
yeah.
So it was fun to do, and I didn't know that I would get such a negative response to people being really upset at the fact that this was
Oh, is it?
a Bocale Corporal Broach novella that didn't feature them until the last few pages. So
Oh, I thought that was extremely funny because they're just looking at these tumbling carriages and thinking, why didn't they wait? Why are they in such a hurry to catch the
yeah,
ferry? They're not even aware that this whole hunt and everything has been going on. Oh, that,
exactly. Yeah.
and I think the book before it, Healthy Dead,
Hmm.
where we get the demon lust, and it's
Hmm.
sort of easy
Hmm.
to predict that she is going to be the lady of benevolence or something. And I was feeling quite smart. Yeah, okay, I got this,
Mm.
and so I was waiting to see that. Oh yes, I know this Dantok is going to be these guys in hiding, and
Hmm.
Reese is the one who has taken this new name of Mr. Must and driving the carriage and all that. So
Oh,
it
right,
was
right. Yeah,
it was really good because coming straight from Healthy Dead,
yeah.
it made a lot of sense.
I guess it would. Yeah.
This that lady in Healthy Dead, I forget the name of the city. Uh, I because I just finished Stone Wielder, and I keep thinking of that lady.
Oh, right.
Is,
Okay.
yeah, is there? This was completely different, isn't it? Because it has the same
Hmm.
monotheistic religion and a
Yeah.
complete hold on all their activities and all those things. So
Yeah, no, it's certainly different. Yeah, I don't think Cam and I ever discussed any kind of crossovers related to the Boca Lane Corporal Broach novellas. But you never know; he may have mined some of it and pluck something up that he wanted to use. No, these they're the means by which I can stay within the Malazan world, but take a break from the pressures of a much more extensive storyline and series of arcs and uh, the historical aspects or quasi historical aspects of the main series or even the trilogies. So these novellas are they're just my uh, these little interludes where I don't know if you ever go to the gym or whatever, but you kind of do some loosening up exercises in between the main sessions, and that's what these novellas are. I just sort of loosen everything up and relax into it and have some fun.
oh, is that why none of these cities are seen on the maps on the
No,
regular maps?
no, no. I mean, they are. I have drawn. I think every city I've touched on, I think, is actually on a map somewhere.
Oh.
So they're not entirely invented. Um, but that may not be true for Fiends of Nightmaria. I know where it is geographically speaking, but I think it's one of those. We have a number of maps that are simply landmass, and there's no cities marked. There's no territories marked. So I think it's one of those is where I place that story.
Yeah, because each time I start one, I try to look up and then I realize that,
Yeah, good luck.
they don't
Yeah.
exist.
Although
Yeah.
I mean, Lamentable Mall is in Coral, so
Yeah, I
uh,
mean, we can pick it up because they talk about theft and,
yeah, yeah,
trying to leave the street and all that. So,
yeah.
the laughter's end, the sea you described.
The Leaves of Laughter's End.
Yeah, yeah, the sea pathway.
Hmm.
Is it like Male's vein itself? Is that the
Um, I know where it is geographically, and I think it's even maybe mentioned in a couple of Cam's books as that particular region. But I don't recall whether I was being specific with male or not. That was just it's a sea story. It's a sea shanty type
yeah,
story.
yeah.
But it's also gothic in the sense that it's equivalent to Alien or Aliens, where you're stuck on a ship and all hell breaks loose, and
Yeah.
everybody has to sort of either survive or fail to survive. So it was a fun little uh, I guess pseudo horror
It was
genre.
horror. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Because when I was reading that, that's when I got the idea that this series is probably best for a Halloween discussion.
yeah, yeah, and I mean it allows me to actually, if I'm going to write this novella, it's in a fantasy setting, it's in a secondary world, but I can take on other genres and just write them as those genres. I know uh, I had thought about doing a murder mystery involving Boca Lane and Corporal Broach.
Oh, that would be
short
so
stories.
interesting.
I have two more. I have two more that I'm contracted on, and I know the storyline of the last one. But the one that leads up to it, I haven't really thought too much about the storyline. But I may do something along those lines and just explore another genre and have fun with that.
yeah, because the horror in Blood Follows was fairly straightforward, I thought, and in
Yeah, it
Lee's,
was. It's the earliest one.
yeah, and then all of a sudden you have these undead rats and all. Oh, it was really it was fun. It was good fun.
Yeah, Blood Falls is me finding my feet on that particular storyline. And my original inspiration was I wanted to kind of do a Fritz Leiber, um, Pfaffer and Grey Mouser style of short stories set in the Malazan world, but to use two utterly despicable characters as the two main movers, the two almost protagonists. But then the point of view is from the manservant, so there's that once removed bit of comfort for the reader. But then, of course, Emancipor Reese started becoming much more interesting as a character as well because he's busy imbibing every drug known to humanity in order to just stay sane in the company of Bokalin and Corporal Broach.
He goes through so much stuff with these
Yeah,
people. He has to carry like breathing lungs, just the lungs somewhere and all that.
yeah.
Can I just ask you about the drugs, because there are so many drugs we come across here,
Mm,
like the real world equivalents. I don't know if you've answered this anywhere else. Like rust leaf is tobacco,
hmm
right? Darang
hmm
is weed.
Yep.
I am not sure how do you pronounce it. Dabayang, the
Um, yeah, I think some of those. I'm not sure about some of those other ones. But yeah, there's various psychoactive
yeah.
compounds that he's making use of, and they would include, I guess, derivatives of both DMT and psilocybin, whatever, right? But yeah, whatever pharmacy you could imagine, Emancipor Reese has attempted uh,
Yeah.
to sort of escape reality through it. So
Yeah, yeah. And he specifically says he doesn't want enlivening alchemies. He wants something that sedates
yeah,
him.
dulls his senses as best as possible. Yeah. The Healthy Dead was I got inspired in a bookstore in Winnipeg. I was I don't know I was buying something and I was at the cash register area, and sometimes those places on the counters they put up books to either side that they're promoting, and it was a book that said, and the title was Die Healthy,
Okay.
and I just saw that and thought, oh my god, I need to write something about this because it's the most absurd concept you can imagine. I mean, I get their point, but at the same time, it definitely inspired me to create um, sort of the wellness industry and to
Yeah,
to give it a few hard kicks, basically.
yeah. The king who is already dead, but he's still being
Yeah,
propelled by the by the gym
yeah,
machine or something. So
yeah. A perpetual motion machine that exercises him uh, past his living. Yeah.
yeah. And I think Bauquelin has a lot of theories on that a human body can only function so much. So it's
Yeah,
sort of like
yeah, yeah. I mean, Bocaline is in many ways, and many authors do this, but they'll use a character to sort of say the unpopular things, right? That
yeah.
sometimes they think. It doesn't mean I'm a believer of everything Bocaline says because there's no way I could be. But at the same time, every now and then, he does say something that actually has a point.
Okay. No, because in I think in some of his books he goes on and on about civilization and how it has
Mhm.
to it has to suit him, and it's not for everyone, and all
Yeah,
those
no,
things.
no, he's the ultimate individualist. So I'm doing a satire on individualism as well through Bocaling and Corporal Broach for that matter. But he's just Corporal's. Well, he's insane, so that doesn't help. But he's also not verbose, and so there's a childlike innocence to his madness for sure.
He's not seen often on the page,
No,
Korpal, because is there any reason behind that? Were these all played characters?
no. Well, yeah, actually, they were. I rolled them up for a game that my friend Mark Paxton McRae was running. So they're GURPS characters. I still have the sheets for them, the character sheets. And I think we played maybe 3 sessions, And Mark at that point said, "I can't handle these two characters. I give up." And so, because they were, if anything, even more insane in the game than they are in the novellas. Um, so yeah, they are rolled up characters, and of course, what tends to happen is, I think, just by nature, you end up focusing more on one character than the other, um, and so Bokaling was very much the intellectual necromancer, with with all these various notions and theories about how the universe operates and his place in it. And then for the novellas, yeah, you just cut him loose and let him go. But Cobra Broach, he's always in the background. He's the um, almost the non-rational or the animalistic side of Boca Lane, and so they need each other in that respect. It's almost as if you've got both Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde um, on stage at the same time, and that's kind of the roles they're playing.
And Bokalin is he's almost affectionate towards Corval Brook, and it's really funny to see because he's despicable with everyone, and with Urli Corval Brook, he's almost like parental with him. He
Oh
keeps
yeah, yeah. Treats him as a child in many ways.
yeah.
Yeah.
But Mansi was a created character for the books.
Yes, yeah. I needed that point of view. I wasn't going to attempt Boca Lane or Cobra Broach's points of view. I don't think it would work as well. It's better to have Boca Lane, pontificating as he does, um,
Yeah.
to a completely unappreciating audience, which would be Emancipor Reese and presumably the reader as well. So
And Mansi keeps interrupting him whenever he starts a monologue.
yeah, he tries. He tries.
And it was good fun to see, Corval Brook taking on the role of a bishop, I think, in the Fiends of
Oh yeah,
Nightmare.
yeah.
I did not expect that. All of a sudden,
No.
yeah.
So the Fiends of Nightmare, I've got a copy sitting here. It's the one with,
The dungeon crawls, the two groups going
yeah,
to.
yes, exactly. It's the yeah, Mortari and Legrout and all the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are sort of the classic gaming group, right? For role playing. So if you think of a group of people playing D&D, you'll get all of these roles that are taken on by various players. And so I was just having some fun with, I guess, low level characters who think they're more powerful than they actually are, or more capable than they actually are. Um, and then to turn their leader, their spokesperson, into the one character with the lowest IQ imaginable, right? So they were good fun to write. They were a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of building up that these two groups are going to clash at some point, and Tiny Chanter just raced through the whole group.
Yeah, well, the chanters are fun. I don't know, and once they showed up in their first, I guess, Leaves of Laughter's End is where they
Yeah,
show up.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I couldn't let go of them. They were too much fun.
yeah.
So they show up again in at least two more, I think, and actually
Okay.
three more if you count Crackpot Trail.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Because Tiny is the audience, one of the audience voices who
yeah,
says
he is.
Tiny
Yeah.
understands everything and Tiny doesn't need to be explained anything. It was great fun. These interruptions, are they like based on your when you role play and things like that, and do your players interrupt you? Because it was such a constant theme throughout CPT. Each time anyone starts telling a story, there is going to be at least one voice saying, "What's going on here?" and "Why is this happening?" And
Um, yeah, it may be part of the gaming experience, if you're running a game. But it's also, I've sat in cinemas where, I've sat with somebody who is asking questions throughout the entire film, and it's like, just watch the damn thing, right? Um, but there, that happens. But also, it reflects something that's, ongoing right now. If you look at, for example, Rings of Power or Wheel of Time, the adaptations, or inspirations for Rings of Power, as soon as an episode drops, the people are on YouTube basically doing the same thing. They are interrupting the story to analyze, what's just been presented to them without knowing where the story's going. And so a lot of the questions are quite literally watch and find out. And yet that becomes almost part of their complaint their complaint package regarding an episode, and it doesn't make any sense to me. You got to know the story before you can actually judge whether uh, a scene is necessary or a scene worked or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And sure, you can judge an episode on its own merit, but if it's linked to a much larger story, you got to wait till you watch the full season, then you can actually do a review. Um, but it's in the nature of commentary now, that people are commenting while the story is ongoing without knowing where it goes, and so I know Crackpot Trail pissed off a lot of people, and I think I don't think that's entirely accidental when given what I'm just describing right now.
But it was sort of the intention because you wanted to show that this is what the audience is doing, isn't it?
Mm,
When you're trying to tell a story,
yeah.
and instead of just going with what Flickr is trying to tell them, and just listen, and because he's promised to redeem you, so he has promised that the ending is
Hmm.
going to redeem you. So just trust him and keep going. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, why didn't you just say so? And why aren't there any heroes in this story? And all those
Yeah.
complaints.
Yeah, and a lot of those. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of a lot of those critiques just for the Malazan book, um, as the series was being published and coming out. So yeah, I just took a little poke in that direction, just for my own amusement.
Yeah, was there any specific event, or it was just built up through all those years of?
Just built up experience of quite often. I mean, when the 10 books are being published as written, the immediate response for each new book that came out was usually negative, and it would take 2-3 months before the reader changed their mind. And I was seeing that online a lot. So I guess a lot of that was in the back of my mind when I was thinking, well, if I'm going to basically do Canterbury Tales meets the Donner Party with this novella, Crackpot Trail. Are you familiar with the Donner Party?
Yeah, I looked up because
Yeah.
I was told
Yeah.
that
Okay.
that was an
Yeah.
inspiration for this.
Yeah, so that's sort of the merging and blending that I was dealing with. But because I was also dealing with Thousand and One Nights, the idea of a story inside a story ad infinitum was something I wanted to play with. And so once I started thinking in those terms, I realized that the audience has to be a participant in the story, and then that gave me the chance to um, make use of characters through the characters of all the different angles that an audience could potentially take in hearing a story, and then satirizing it.
There was even the very the popular artist with his fans. He has an
His
undying
fans,
fan club.
yes, his all devouring fans. Yeah,
Yeah. So I was expecting that at least one of those women would lose their eyes or something because they're quite blind by him.
yeah. That I mean, some of that happens. It happens in our world in the sense that there's you get a I mean, I'm not going to mention names, but I've known some very, very well known authors who, when they show up at a convention, they have groupies show up as well
Mhm.
and follow them around everywhere. And so, yeah, I just sort of took that notion again and
Yeah, it's little
did a bit of
unfamiliar for
stand up.
me that
Sorry,
it's little unfamiliar for me that writers would have groupies. So
I know, isn't it's a strange thing, but I have witnessed it on occasion.
and I was thinking about the way you write about Per Snippet, who has a severe depression, and no, it was a very nice character because she was very sympathetic, and it was I was just going to ask you that because you don't really describe it as depression, you just
Mhm.
mention it through some other some dreamy sequence of her standing alone and looking around, and I think even the older writer who is going to the artist of the for the award show. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I'm bad at names. So this guy also has this imposter syndrome, isn't it? So
Mhm.
he's standing and thinking that he's all alone, and it's all told in a very metaphorical way. So I was just
Mhm.
wondering that how exactly do you do that? Because I know exactly what you're talking about just by
Hmm.
reading those, because it's
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Characters sort of reveal themselves to me as I write them. And no matter how sort of simple they may appear when they first show up, there's a complexity to them, and I feel beholden, if you will, to um, giving that the space it needs. Um, just I don't know. It's a way of not just understanding characters, but of being empathetic towards them, regardless of their situation. So I guess that's sort of where even in these, satirical, comedic, um, occasionally fairly vicious stories, my humanity pokes through in some fashion or another. So.
Yeah, because per snippet just stood out to me because of all those other characters going through all these other things, and she is, portrayed really sympathetically. And even Flicker has he has this obligation to help her out more than anyone else.
Hmm.
So I'm just saying that
Yeah.
without ever using the words depression or all those imposter syndrome or anything, it's conveyed
Mm.
so specifically. So uh,
Yeah. But I mean, that's also quite often one of the reasons why a lot of people don't pick up the characterization stuff that I'm up to, right? Because I won't put a big neon flashing sign on those elements of the person. Um, but if I can fall into their point of view and their voice, that stuff should work its way through in some fashion, I think.
Uh, the worms of Blearmouth. It has the Lord Fangatooth, the render.
Hmm.
Was there any reason for, I think from there onwards, all the names start becoming more and more
Ridiculous.
ridiculous. Yeah.
They do become ridiculous. Yeah.
I think till then it's like sort of Malazan names like Briv and
Hmm.
Goss and things like that. And then it suddenly becomes only puns.
I know there's a lot of them, and I don't know where they come from. I mean, they pop into my head. Some are if you look at Fiends of Nymeria, you've got Mortari and Legrout, and that it's mortar and grout, right? That's
Yes.
all they do is climb walls. So that kind of thing just sort of shows up, and then I decide. I feel with the novellas, these ones, I can get away with anything, and
Yeah.
so I just go with it. I probably couldn't get away with that stuff in the Malazan uh, novels, but in the Boca Lane Cobra Brooch stuff, yeah, anything goes, and so I get to have a lot more fun with the character names, and a lot of um, Worms of Blearmouth is also inspired partly by the film adaptation of The Raven, which what's the guy's name? Anyways, the actors were Boris Karloff and Vincent Price, and they're two wizards, and they have this magical duel sitting across opposite each other at this long table, which is an absolutely wonderful scene. And so I wanted to sort of do one of those. I would basically lift that idea and do that duel with Boca Lane and Fanga, whatever his name
Fangatooth.
was. Yeah,
Fangatooth.
yeah. Um, and just play around with those ideas of what tyranny actually is, and how much of tyranny, at least in Fangatude's mind, is entirely in his own head. It's nowhere else. I mean, he does not have the capabilities of anything of the sort. But he will make himself a tyrant of this small village and go from there. It was fun.
And the whole duel comes down to just cookies, because Vocalin
Cookies,
just
yeah,
makes cookies.
yeah.
And he even corrects him that your name should be the renderer. I mean, render doesn't make sense.
No, it
Uh,
doesn't make any sense. No.
there's one character there who was really interesting. I think he was like meant to be an elder god or something, Wufin, I think, who lived near the beach and went through all the shipwrecked
Mm-hmm.
treasures and things like that. And then all of a sudden, at the end, we find out that he has powers. Right?
Mm-hmm.
His staff can turn into a sword, and he just kills them all and all that. So that was very
Yeah,
interesting. We're not going to revisit any of these characters, is it,
I
going
doubt it.
forward?
I doubt it. It's part of the idea that almost wherever you go in our world, but also in the Malazan world, you'll find amazing, interesting people. They're out there, and they don't have to advertise themselves. They don't promote themselves. They are just genuinely amazing people, and so that will show up in the Malazan stuff all the time because I experience that. I travel and I meet extraordinary people with extraordinary stories. and capabilities and all the rest.
No,
So,
because this, I keep trying to, I don't know how to argue this point because so many of, people who I discuss Malazan with, one of the common, I mean, this is not nothing to do with the novellas, but so many of the discussions come around how are these starving children or how are these poor laborers having all these philosophical thoughts and monologues and all. And to me, it seems quite obvious, the more variety of people you meet, you're going to see that everyone has their own set of,
oh, do they
yeah,
ever? Yeah, they have
yeah.
worldviews, and quite often they have really thought them through, um, and so they have built that worldview, and they are able to articulate it or not. Sometimes it's only hinted at if somebody is not particularly loquacious or good with words, but it's all there. It doesn't mean it's not a blank slate, these in the heads of anybody.
Yeah,
So why presume that through social standing, that is somehow a reflection of the inner depths of a human being? To me, it's absurd. So you can find philosophers in the ditch digger and the construction worker and you know, the refuse collector or whatever. I mean, these are all fully fully self-realized people, because we all are, and each of us has our one point of view, and that's it. And to presume that the people you meet or the people you even see in the street don't have that is absurd because they do.
and it
So
most of the time it comes down to they're not that educated or they're struggling to live. And to me it feels like the more the more comfortable and distracted you are, that's when your inner life goes down. But if you're actually struggling to to just get through life, and they're going to be much more uh, have a much more complex inner life. uh,
in many ways, I grew up poor, and uh, early in our marriage, we were very poor. It doesn't mean you stop thinking. If anything, it's the opposite, right? You start looking at the world and thinking, well, what is it about this world that one, I'm not succeeding in thriving within this place, and two, is there anything systemic about this, our entire social system, our civilization itself? That is actually damaging to the human spirit. And so you go from there. Um, in many ways, almost too much comfort and too much protection for an individual from childhood onwards actually creates almost an illusion of a world that actually isn't real. And as a consequence, I mean, I think we're seeing that. I'm going to get political here. We're seeing that in the UK, for example, and the party in power rifling through all of its members to elect the new prime minister. And you can sort of sense that that entire government is built off of Etonian public school kind of mindsets where they don't know how hard it is to live out there. They've been protected from it all their lives. So it's privilege, and so to come from a place where you did not have that privilege, you're seeing the world in a very different way, and you're dealing with it in a different way. And so, I mean, in that respect, it doesn't surprise me that they are as incompetent as they are. So,
One, because we were just recently discussing Midnight Tides, and
mm,
there was a lot of criticism about how does Udinas have all these deep high thoughts and all that. And
mm.
to me it felt quite natural that because he's written quite smart. He's not just a literary slave. He
No,
has,
and what a strange notion to presume that somebody who is a slave is also, transformed into some kind of automaton. No, I mean, his only avenue to freedom is what's in his head, right? Because all the rest has been taken away, but he is free in his thoughts. I don't see why that would be a point of contention.
yeah. One question from Blood Follows, where
Mm,
I think towards the end, when they board the ship, Sun Curl, and Bokelin tells Reese that we can appease the Storm Riders with these one or two jars of blood, and that is sufficient payment and all. But that doesn't match what I read in Stonewielder because I mean I've not finished the rest of the
mm,
the novels of the Empire. I've
mm.
stopped at Stonewielder. that is not what I'm reading there, isn't it? Is this like something else, or is it something Bauquelin has just told himself?
He's just yeah, he's made it up. I mean, quite often for Bocalane, optimism is more important than reality, and it's his belief. His belief system can shape the world, right? And that's what the individualist, in many respects, believes. So he's just the extreme version of that. And of course, quite often in the novellas, his assumptions are completely wrong, and he fails utterly, and which is
Yeah,
why he's always fleeing the
he's
last city he's been in because he tried
yeah.
to take it over and none of it worked.
Yeah.
So I repeat that trope over and over again with Boca Lane, that he's very sure of himself, but he's quite often patently wrong.
But then he always manages to escape,
Yeah,
regardless of what is thrown at him. Will we ever
exactly.
get a backstory for him? No, this is just
No.
where it starts at Blood
Well, I
Forest.
mean, there's hints of backstory. I think in the latest one, I think there's
Oh,
there's mention of his dog. He had a dog once.
oh, oh, that's very interesting. I have not read that
Yeah,
yet.
yeah, he brings up that story.
But we
Um,
don't know where they are from
no,
in the universe. No.
I don't think so. No.
So, Cracked for Trail was your favorite among them, among
Yeah.
all the novellas you've written.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
It's one of the favorite things of anything I've written. Yeah.
I think I've more or less finished all the questions I had.
Hmm.
Right. Oh, yeah, I wanted to ask about the master and manservant because Tihol and Bug have this amazing dynamic, and it continues here with Mansi and Bokalin. So, is this something you enjoy doing? Because these are not gamed characters, and because I keep thinking that unless you played them, the humor comes because of that. But no, this is just something you. Was there any inspiration for these type of duos?
Well, Western Jeeves, I think would be an
Ah, yeah,
example. Yeah.
yeah, that's the one
Um,
I.
yeah. And yeah, it's always fun to have that sort of two characters in interplay. And in the one respect, it is from our gaming because that's how Cam and I gamed.
Okay.
Um, so you often had a pairing up of characters, and then we would have whole game sessions that were nothing but dialogue, but they would be a lot of fun. Like
Yeah.
nobody cast a spell, nobody drew a sword. It was just conversations and absurd situations and all the rest. And that's how we uh, entertain each other in running the games, and it was great fun. So that echo is always there whenever I end up with a pairing of characters. The nostalgia sort of slips back in, and I can realize I can have fun with these characters. But also, it allows two points of view to play off each other a lot, and so more often than not, if you have clashing points of view, it's even more entertaining. Two people thrust together, for example, Kindly and Lieutenant Pors,
Ports.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which is very much Catch-22 stuff going on there. Joseph Heller, um, but yeah, you get them playing off against each other in this kind of very quiet contest of wills between two characters. Good fun.
Here it's even more interesting here because in Bug, at least in Tehol and Bug's case, Bug
Hmm.
has the power, right? He
Mm,
is the one who drives the whole dynamic, and Tehol
yeah,
thinks that he is in control. So that is
yeah. Tahol knows. I think even early on that his illusion of control is a facade. I think he's aware of it. I mean, they're eating food that couldn't sustain anybody, and yet they're just still there.
I laughed so hard at all those soul soup jokes, and they drink lanolin tea.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, none of this is possible, and he's not foolish enough to think it is. So he's got to know that something's going on here. But he's just going to run with it and go with it.
So I just wanted to ask you more about your humor influences, like this type of absurdist humor, the way we
Hmm.
see in the novellas. I'm not sure I've read any of those over the top type of humor. So I was just wondering if there are influences which.
That's a good question. It doesn't show up very often in fantasy. Um, I think there was a novel called is it Brack the Barbarian by Jakes, which is a very much over the top comedic take on Conan, basically.
Okay.
And I think there's also, this may be the same novel, but there's a novel called Mention My Name in Atlantis,
Mhm.
which is very, very funny. If you were to Google that, yeah, that might be Brack the Barbarian. I'm sure somebody listening to this will be able to provide
Yeah.
the details on that. But yeah, I didn't see much of it. There's a lot of wry humor in Fritz Leiber's Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, which is good fun. Um, the over the top stuff.
Like, the
I mean, I've never read. I tried reading Pratchett. It doesn't grab me. It's a
really,
horrible
you
thing to
not.
admit. Yeah,
Oh
it
no.
just never grabbed me.
But the
Um,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. It just didn't. So I can't. I'm trying to think of anybody else doing that kind of stuff. I mean, I was first exploring that stuff when I was at Iowa, the writers' workshop. I was writing some, I guess, tall tales slash magic realist kind of stories. And again, it was more a product of frustration with the program at the time. So I just sort of, yeah, cut all restraints loose and wrote this, a couple of ridiculous stories and realized I had fun doing it. And so that stayed with me. That it's a lot of fun to not only create absurd situations, but to even make the notion of the story itself absurd um, for the reader and inviting them to just, come along for the ride. So.
No, I think we see a slight amount of this type of humor in Midnight Tides, because some
Mhm.
of the Letteras humor is little
Yeah,
extra compared to the rest of the books, and the
absolutely.
novellas are just they're just full on over
Yeah.
the top and surreal. So can I just ask you about Midnight Tides, because
Mhm.
it has completely distinct voices, isn't it? The
Mhm.
entire Edo storyline has a strict and serious type of voice, and the Letteras is it's just fun. It's most of it is fun until at least the end. So was there some conscious decision to separate these voices, or did it just happen?
No, yeah, one needs. I had a sense that I always have the sense that if you're going to produce a long book, you need to alter style, dependent on point of view and setting, um, just to maintain that sense of distinction between the two forces.
Okay.
Um, But I mean, there's a real dark side to the Theory storylines that is, mirrored in a bit more overt dark stuff going on with the Taista Dur. So both sides have. Well, actually, the Adur don't have much in the way of humor. That's for sure.
No,
Um,
no, the Edo voice is extremely dour and
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of formal.
Yeah, it's pretty grim stuff, isn't it? But I knew if I was going to be commenting on, I guess, an economic system that's fairly close to, what exists in our world, then you either laugh or you weep, right? So um, that's where sort of Tehol and Bug became two who are going to play the game and defeat the game. Um, and then of course characters sort of showed up around them that added to, and that's the thing when you fall into writing humor, it's fairly common for a lot of other characters to start popping up and adding to the humor. So you had Shirkalal and you had Ublalapung and you had the Rat Catchers Guild and that kind of stuff, and it's so yeah, there's sort of to some extent satirizing um, the economically based social structures and the illusion of justice or the justice system in this stuff, which we all know is based entirely on how much money you have, whether you go to jail or not. Um, so just playing around with that kind of stuff. And yeah, the humor just sort of squeezes out at that point. It's something. It's a deflection method on my part, I think. Rather than despair, I would rather laugh.
Yeah, no, because so there is all the humor with the brothels and ublala and all that. I Because the way I read it was, it is over the top. It is meant to be not to be taken at face value, but
No.
lots of people tend to miss the point. It's sort of like, why is there? I have just read Mayan's rape and Seren going through all this, and now all of a sudden we are discussing how this brothel is decorated and all that, and Tehol and Bug just having fun there, and it to me it
Well,
yeah,
yeah, but it's relieving pressure as well, right? I mean, Saren Padak's story is it's a traumatic story,
it
and
is, yeah.
uh, it also deals with um, self harm. It deals with attempted suicide. I mean, it's heavy stuff that's going on with Saren Padak in her, especially in her internal world. Um, and so sometimes you have to, I feel, anyways, you have to relieve that pressure. Um, there's always well, there's a multitude of sides to any particular subject matter, and it doesn't mean you're disrespecting it. It means that you're recognizing that um, everything is contextual, and there's a time and place for um, serious examination of these things, and then there's also a time and place for just um, releasing the tensions that have been built. Yeah, it's a balancing act, and for some readers, especially for readers being very literal, they may struggle making that transition.
And I don't know, there is some who just just sexual humor just puts people off. I'm not sure why, and CPT just just throws it all away. So
Well, yeah, I mean, but especially in North America, it's got a Canada, where I live now, and the States. There's a real puritanical kind of streak that runs through our culture. Um, that it has no problem with. It has a huge problem with, say, an exposed breast on a screen, but it has no problem with somebody killing 50 people. It's just,
chopping heads
yeah,
and
chopping heads off, and eviscerating, and all the rest, and it's just so weird. So yeah, I mean, there will be that kind of response. If people are uncomfortable with sex itself, then yeah, they don't want to see it on the page in any fashion.
you're telling me about the the way to relieve pressure when there is dark stuff going on, and because Toll the Hounds I think did that really well, because Krupp telling you at every at every point he just tells you don't grieve yet, and I
Hmm.
just really I don't know, I'll never get over Toll the Hounds, probably because just
Mm.
because of Krupp's voice and him telling you that the night is still going on and all that.
Yeah, yeah. It was the means by which I could hold off on my grief, my personal grief. So there was, yeah, he was as useful to me as I guess I'd hoped he would be for the reader as well on
Yeah.
that journey.
Because that was yeah, but I just reread it like recently. I just skimmed
Mm.
through some of the sections, and it just gets much better knowing that Krupp is like sort of watching out for you when you're reading
Yeah,
all the horrific stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He's standing there to take the worst, but also offer the best.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, I don't think I really enjoyed him much in Gardens of the Moon, because to me he just seemed like I didn't get the eel reveal till it happens on page.
Hmm.
It was only in Memories of Ice that he just came across, and I realized just what a compassionate character is. We have a theory. Can I just ask you that
Hmm.
Krupp is he like a reincarnation of some of the Reeve spirit or something, or he's
Of
just a smart guy? Uh,
I It's interesting. He was one of the first characters I wrote up when Cam was going to run a game in Darujistan. Um, I gave I gave no background to him at all. I was just going to have him. He's popped up as if out of nowhere. Um, and then I would, in terms of role playing, I would play him to the hilt, and for entertainment purposes more than anything else. And in many ways, Cam did the same with Kellenbed.
okay.
Even though he's well, I mean, Dancer's Lament doesn't really tell you much about where Kellenbed comes from, and
But
that's kind of
I've not finished Dancer's
yeah,
Lament.
that's kind of how he wanted it, and I really appreciate that. And I think Krupp is quite similar in that respect. We don't need his we don't need his background. We don't need him to explain him. He is already a meta character, and you know um, that's kind of hinted at in Gardens of the Moon. It's a bit more overt in Memories of Ice, but then it's cut loose completely for Toll the Hounds.
Pronouns.
He is a meta character that uh, is not just my stand-in, but hopefully the stand-in for the reader as well.
No, we were discussing about the power levels because Krupp is able to withstand Brood's hammer blow. And
Hmm.
Niflrog had an interesting theory that, it's just because Krupp is the one telling the story to Kamensurd, so he must have been like, yeah, yeah, sure, that was a huge hammer, and, it just didn't affect me. And he must have lied, is what Niflrog's theory was.
No, I
That
think the Forog's right. And that's why I've often described Toll the Hounds as a cipher for the series, specifically with respect to its meta elements. Right, this is a constructed story, and that's the reality of the situation. Is uh, I constructed that story. Cam's constructing, his aspects of the story. Um, we put in there what we want to be in there. We deliver the themes that we want to have delivered. We explore them as we choose, and accordingly, we choose also the events and the sequence of events. Um, and Krupp proceeds to do that for Toll the Hounds, for example. Um, so there's always been a strong metafictional aspect to the entire series. And some people say, okay, well, that's a postmodern or post-structural, whatever. And you can argue in those elements, but I'm not a huge fan of postmodernism anyway. So I took from it what I needed, but I'm not a proponent of it. And that only actually becomes apparent if you read the entire series. By the time you get to books after Toll the Hounds and you get to Dust of Dreams and Crippled God, you can see that the postmodern thesis is quite clearly rejected by the storytelling and how the series concludes. So it's there. The metafictional stuff is there, and it's just something I was exploring even when I was writing contemporary fiction short stories. I was fascinated with the nature of storytelling, the nature of audience, the selection of detail versus that which is not revealed. That stuff always fascinated me. So there's Krupp imposes in Told Hounds a sense of control over basically an uncontrollable universe, and there is something that is that's an intrinsic aspect of storytelling. We tell a story in order to impose control over a fairly random, chaotic universe, and it comforts us. And so that's kind of what it's all about.
And that's the way we have all understood, like Harlow, whose
Mm,
age should not really make sense there, but then no,
it's
it
not
works for the
relevant.
story,
Yeah.
works for the tale that is being told. And I think the whole of Sir Norman's arc, which
Mm-hmm.
happens within the Barrow, is sort of, it's just something that happens off screen, right? We
Mm-hmm.
really don't know it's just an unconscious man lying near the Barrow, and the rest of the story is just told to us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
not really relevant exactly what is going on inside the barrow because it
No,
works
it's
for the
not.
story.
Yeah, it's not. It's about the emotions that are explored and hopefully engender in the audience, the reader, but with as much tenderness as possible. I think one of the things that sort of shapes at least our approach to the Malazan stuff was to be really respectful of the audience and to never write down in any respect in terms of the voice and the style and all the rest and expectations. Recognizing that we're going to lose readers along the way. And some will just not. Their code for understanding is different from ours to such an extent that the two cannot cross. And that's just the way it is. You can't please everyone. So
No, you went in the opposite direction with Flickr because you wrote extremely down to the audience there,
did he
which
ever? Right? Yeah,
yeah,
but you see, his audience was right there, right? They were
yeah.
sitting around the campfire, so he was free to do so. And um, there's some really great examples of early fiction where the narrator's voice is so filled with contempt that you cannot help but keep reading because it's entertaining in and of itself,
No,
right?
I started reading the Iliad because you said that was
Mm,
one of the inspirations, right? So,
hmm.
and it is so obvious that who exactly the the narrator likes and whom he doesn't like. So there is such a horrible bias which just comes through.
Isn't it?
Anyone who
Absolutely.
talks against the king is like beaten, and oh, it's
Yes.
really it's good fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely true. And that shapes the story, doesn't it? Right? I mean, so I think if the author is aware of that, then the author has to respect that there will be different responses to what they're doing, and they need to be mindful of what they're up to, because it's almost impossible to predict how a scene will be received. You can be as careful as you want to be, but that doesn't imply that the reader is going to be equally as careful. So
Yeah. No, I was just wondering because I think none of the novellas have been made into audiobooks yet, isn't it? I
not that I'm
couldn't
aware
find
of.
them.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Have you ever considered narrating any of them, especially Cracked for Trail?
Um. Oh wow, that would be interesting. I don't know if I'm a good enough performer as a reader to pull that off.
Hmm.
I remember when we did that one YouTube thing with me and AP, and he ended up singing one of the poems. I mean, he
Oh,
was great.
I've missed this.
You've not seen that one, okay?
Oh, no, no, I must have missed
Yeah,
it.
he actually sings the Brash Fluster Lacine story. I think it is.
Oh, no, I have to look it up. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's great fun. So yeah, he's got his talents flow easily in that direction. I'm more of a deadpan reader. I understate as opposed to um, over dramatized. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I remember in Iowa, I did a reading of one of those tall tales, and in that instance, the understated, almost flat reading style was really effective. I mean, people were howling. So maybe I could pull off a Bocaline Cobra Brooch. I don't know.
Maybe Flicker's voice at least, because, he, he's,
Possibly,
it's all the
possibly.
people reacting to Flicker rather than him,
Yeah,
acting
yeah.
and in that.
I hadn't thought about it. I don't know if that's where any of my where I have any abilities at all. I don't know if I lie in that performative direction.
No,
Um,
not CPT, but some of the earlier ones like Worms and all. I was just thinking that, because it has a very distinct voice, and because I've
mhm.
seen your interviews and all, and I was just imagining that, I can almost hear you telling all these things. So I was just wondering because we
Yeah,
haven't got the audiobooks yet.
yeah. No. Yeah, those novellas are, I think, closer to my natural voice than, for example, the Malazan books, for sure. Um, I do have difficulty taking things seriously, and so it kind of it shows up sometimes in the worst circumstances. But it's pretty close to my narrative voice. I think my natural narrative voice.
Can I ask you a couple of general questions and then
Hmm.
we can probably wind it up?
Okay.
This deck of dragons, right?
Hmm.
So we don't really have much fan art in that, and there's very few. So I was
Hmm.
thinking because you paint and stuff. So have you ever considered coming up with a set or just at least having a concept art for them?
Um, I did I did four oil paintings on board before Gardens of the Moon even got published that were images for the deck of dragons, and they're long lost. They're gone.
Lost.
Yeah.
Oh,
Um, we basically completely ran out of money. I think I sold two of them, gave one away, and then we left our house. We sold up everything. Had a Volkswagen Westphalia, 1 year old child, and we just jumped in the vehicle and drove south. So everything got left behind at that point. Possessions kind of disappeared at that point. I know there's a Czech publisher that's done an extraordinary edition of Gardens of the Moon with a huge fold-out map, and I think they were doing some promotional stuff in terms of creating a deck of dragons.
I think they're
But
giving out bookmarks with the deck
yeah,
of the
something like
dragons.
that. But it's an onerous task. It's a big task. And while some people have sort of talked about doing it, nobody's really sort of stepped up and said, "Okay, I'll do all 72 cards of whatever it is of Deck of Dragons as a tarot deck or whatever." Nor would I recommend it as a tarot deck. But there's no stopping people doing what they do, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I don't have time, no. And I'm so out of practice as an illustrator that I've probably lost the ability as well.
I think in Facebook, you had a recent painting. I think some priestess in the Coltane's cult or
Hmm.
something. You had a digital rendering or something, isn't it?
I
Like
did. It was
it was
digital.
quite recent, I think. Uh,
Hmm.
is this like a character we're going to see in No Life Forsaken?
No, I don't think so. I was just messing around with Photoshop and see what I could come up with.
Okay.
Um, I mean, there's a lazy part of me that it's not just lazy, but oil paints, even though they're far less toxic than they used to be. I was using oil paints in high school, and so I think I'm oversensitized to them in an allergic fashion.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
linseed oil, especially, as much as I love the smell of it, I pay the price. I pay the price for painting. So then I was thinking, well, okay, maybe I can try this digital stuff. But again, I don't have the patience to actually learn the programs well enough. It's a lot
So
of
because
work.
it had a title, so I was just wondering, because we come back to seven cities, so maybe this is the character who might return. Oh,
Oh, I hadn't thought of that, but no. There's a lot of comedic stuff going on right now in my writing of No Life Forsaken, uh,
okay.
because I've got another squad. Well, there's a squad and a half that are pretty central to the story, and yeah, those characters are, if anything, crazier than the ones in The God Is Not Willing.
Okay.
So they're proving to be a lot of fun.
Okay. Are we not going to see Karsa in this book either? Can you
Nope,
answer or not? No?
nope,
No? Yes,
nope.
we sort of expected that. Okay, yeah. I'm so you
Yeah,
know,
in many ways, this trilogy is almost an extended version of Crackpot Trail.
okay.
In the fact that Karsa, he will be in the fourth book, but I don't know where in the fourth or third book. Sorry, I don't know
Okay.
where in the third book he's going to eventually step onto the stage, because it is about legacy and it's about what leads up to uh, a major scene involving Karsa. That is what the entire trilogy is about. But I have to get there. So.
Yeah, yeah, because that's sort of what we're all thinking that he might
Mm.
not show up and yeah. Okay, regarding Raraku's reformation of the sea, why
Mhm.
is it called a freshwater sea now? Because shouldn't it be a lake?
Well, it is a lake, but you know what? Lake, at least as understood, at least in English, is always sort of imagined as something of fairly limited size. Like, unless you grew up alongside Lake Superior or Lake Winnipeg, when you think of lake, you think of I can see the other side. Lake Winnipeg, if you look north from the South Shore, no, you cannot see the other side. It's
Mhm.
basically as big as an inland sea. Um, and so I chose I chose sea as opposed to lake because lake feels too small as a word
Yeah.
in terms of its
No,
meaning.
sea, but then you keep mentioning it as a freshwater sea, and that.
Mhm. That's the only way I can kind of specify that while it's called a sea, it's also freshwater. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I grew up in Winnipeg and Manitoba, and which is a big province, and a good large part of Saskatchewan, the province beside it, and probably a little bit into Alberta, was all once a freshwater sea called the Agassiz Sea. When the glaciers melted, they produced an enormous body of water that then flowed into Hudson's Bay, which is saltwater. So freshwater can hold saltwater at bay. Um, and but when I think of the Agassiz, they call it Lake Agassiz. But I mean, it's easily it would have been one of the largest. But you see, that's just it. It's a body of water that is freshwater, but it's also connected to the sea.
Okay,
So I don't know
because
what you would call that.
no, I'm glad I asked this because to me it was just so odd to read something like I had no clue about the Agassiz
Mhm.
Sea, and yeah, I'm
Yeah,
happy I asked this.
yeah. Well, no, it is called Lake Agassiz. So I mean, I think in geomorphological terms, it is a lake. Rariku is a lake. It's not a sea.
Yeah,
Um, but the residents, the denizens of that land, call it a sea. So,
yeah. So yeah, the accept was really we're all excited to see what the new adjunct is doing and the new RN fall and all that. So we're just waiting for
mm,
that.
mm, yeah,
Yeah.
they're one of the storylines, but there's two others. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I'm having fun with it. I'm enjoying it.
We are not going to see Malikrel up close even
No,
here.
no, no,
No,
absolutely not.
he's going to be at a distance. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the emperor. He's not even in the continent. He's not there. Mm.
So I think that's all the questions I had.
Okay. All right. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much.
Oh, no
Just,
problem.
because we are usually, or I am at least usually discussing Malazar in the subreddit, and you did an AMA recently. Uh, can I just invite you to just come and hang out there? Because,
To the
there is
subreddit.
plenty of discussions going on. Yeah. And at least
What?
now we have this read along. So
Mm-hmm.
every week we are covering a couple of chapters. I think we started in Feb or something, and we'll be starting Bone Hunters soon.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
it's nice fun to see the new readers, because
Mm,
we tend to just read alone and we just skip through so many of those things. But the new readers are doing really good, and
cool.
it's
Cool.
nice. So if you could just hang out, it would be, we would really appreciate that.
I'll see what I can do. I think. Do I have a subreddit account? I might. I'm not sure.
You got this other name recently, isn't it? When you joined the AMA, it had
Uh,
a weird conscious
yeah, I don't know
or
what all
some,
that was. That was
yeah,
randomly generated. It wasn't
generated, yeah.
wasn't coming from me at all.
Yeah.
Um, I think when I did one, I did dead author, but I don't know if that's the identity that would come
I
up on
think
that.
there was one with your own name, Steven Erikson. I think
Is
there
there?
was one account. Yeah, long ago in fantasy, I've seen the
Mm,
old AMAs,
yeah,
so it
it could
has your
be.
name.
Yeah,
So AP sometimes hangs out. Sometimes he clarifies stuff.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So, so yeah, thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for
Yes,
joining
it's great.
us. And you're one of the main reasons we started the podcast, so that we could continue our Malazan conversation. So I'm
Very
really
cool.
happy that I got to talk to you today.
It's been great fun. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you. So happy Halloween.
Yeah, and to you.